Okay, so here's the aftermath. We were just trying to rush to get some of the last shots done so we could finish with 4 shots a day in our 3-hour window. Okay, we were here doing the aftermath cleanup from the shoot, and yeah, the salt flats. The salt flats is a very unforgiving environment. It is corroding a lot of our equipment, and some of the props, well, specifically Man in Boots' costume is taking a pretty big beating. The leather's just drying up like crazy. Okay, so we're checking the costume now. Here's our nice little checklist that we ended up making after last filming's issues of forgetting some of the important costume items. So now we have it a before shoot check and then an after shoot check to make sure we get it all back. The mask did not make it completely through the shoot. It started kind of failing towards the end, so we had to jury rig it on set, and then we'll be going through over the next week, fixing that and getting back up to 100%. It's a pretty crazy location. Looking at the footage, especially from this last shoot, it is completely worth it. But I mean, honestly, just for me, and I think for Drew as well, and even for Frank, there's just sometimes where it's like, man, this is torture. Why are we doing this? Here's our little repair kit for being out there in the middle of the salt flats. Bug spray, which we've learned over time that it's really important to have. Got a little medical kit just in case someone explodes. We've got our black acrylic paint, our brown acrylic paint, and our wonderful yellow oxide. Our drill, and then our thing of screws to make any repairs out there on set. We got our sunscreen, which I usually forget to put on, and everybody has to remind me. Just sitting out there in the salt flats, your face starts burning. It almost feels like you have a sunburn, but you don't. It's really just salt irritating every pore of your skin. And then I had a whole bunch of cuts from working on the trailer and building the props. And out there in the salt flats, I was getting all this salt inside my cuts, and so my hands were burning as we're trying to move stuff around. So it was pretty intense. The shoot day went awesome. We were able to, you know, I think as Drew said in the last episode, we were able to kind of reassess the situation and get back at it. Got the pods fixed to where it would travel nicely. It actually traveled perfectly fine on the trailer. The trailer additions changed everything. And actually the most damage that the pod got was us carrying it almost 150 yards out to our shooting location. But it didn't damage it too much. There were some small repairable things, and it worked fine for the shots that we had. But that's it. Since we were able to get the 25-foot shot finally, that we literally have been bringing the 25-foot stand out there for the past 6 shoots that we've gone to, and have just never been able to get that shot. So finally we got it. It was a little windy, made the camera shake, but Drew and myself, we both love it because it adds just a little bit of characteristic of this is a real shot. We dumped the footage on the computer. We've been going through a little bit of editing process. Overall, the shoot was awesome. I don't want to say it was perfect because honestly, I think it's misleading. You know, I think sometimes there's big things that go wrong, like last time we went out to shoot, or there's little things that go wrong. Like, you know, we were setting up for the 25-foot shot, had everything perfectly in place, and then right as we were about to hit record, actually right as I hit record, the motors failed on the Ronin because the wind was so strong it just kept working the motor, and they give out. So then we had to drop the 25-foot rig down while Frank's still there waiting in position, and then we reset it, lifted the thing back up to the top, got it ready, pushed record, got it, it worked perfectly. So, you know, just little things like that. I think for us, it's always important to keep in mind that things are going to go wrong. You just got to have a good attitude about it. We've been editing Navigator and Davinci Resolve 14. We were part of the beta kind of throughout the few months before, as we've just been editing it as we get shots together. Now we're on the full final version of Davinci Resolve 14, and it's been going well. Davinci works very well with a feature film edit flow. We've enjoyed it a lot. We were having to do proxies when we were in Premiere Pro, And so far, throwing in the full resolution 4K footage that we're then color correcting into HDR, we haven't had to use proxies yet in Davinci, which has been really nice. We'll see if it stays that way as the projects get bigger. That's an advantage of where each chapter will be in its own project file, which we were doing anyways in Premiere, but it still was getting laggy as the projects grow. And honestly, as we've been editing over the past few months and year in testing, and we have the Mac Pro trash can, and we have the highest end graphics cards at the time that you could get in them, and they're not the most amazing graphics cards in the world, but they're still pretty good, and Davinci uses them versus Premiere just wasn't using them. And it was like, man, we have these, you know, $4,000 graphics cards or whatever that we put into the computer. I think they're $1,500 a piece or something. It wasn't using them all, which was really frustrating. So Davinci has been great because it uses that power. So far, it's been a win-win, but we'll see how it goes. There's a bit of a learning curve, but that's okay. So editing-wise, it's been pretty straightforward because it's been storyboarded, and because we aren't really to anything that narrative-wise can kind of be changed by dialogue or anything like that, we're pretty much cutting it together as it was boarded. There's been a few shots where we've been like, oh, this actually works better after, you know, the previous shot. And so those are really the only things that changed. You know, some shots we need like a little bit of stabilization, just a touch, which is really hard to do. Warp stabilizer in After Effects does not like the salt flats at all. It is very hard to get points. So we don't rely on that at all. Really, we rely on the Ronin and the equipment that we build to get the shot that we need. And then we just try to, in some cases, reduce it a bit. In some cases, we're slowing down footage and ramping it up just for pacing's sake. It shouldn't feel like a speed ramp, but there are some instances where we've done that to make, you know, things a little bit more powerful, or things a little less powerful. That's done through Davinci, or in some cases when Davinci can't handle it, or it just isn't very friendly to do within Davinci, we actually throw it over to After Effects, do it there, and then render it out in a DNX HD file. And we're kind of trying to figure out how to keep the color space the same so we don't lose our dynamic range that we'll need for doing the HDR edit. As a director, I try to have all the plans that I can on set to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can to make sure that we know what's next, what's going there, what's the preparation, how do we get this right. Things will go wrong, but oftentimes allowing some of those mistakes to go wrong and then kind of considering the possibilities of how did that help or did that detract. You know, sometimes it detracts and you have to do a reshoot, but sometimes it actually works. We actually ended up reshooting the first scene, and we had both in the editing room floor, the one that went wrong and the one that we thought went right, and the one that went wrong was a lot better than the one that went right. So just kind of keeping an open mind. So hooray for mistakes. They sometimes help. We got 4 shots done, basically a 4-hour period, which isn't bad for the type of large landscape shots that we're getting. But hey, Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg said he was getting 8 shots a day. And those are 4 full film days. We're at least keeping up with Spielberg. So that's not too bad.